Stefan, welcome to Perfect.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So you're on the show today because you're sort of an expert in partnerships, and you're a good guy too, but it's partnerships memory that the listener's going to care about. So what we're going to talk today is like how you actually scale through partnerships, like the good, the bad. I mean, a starting point is when we talk about partnerships, what do we mean by partnerships?
Great loaded question to start off, James. It's great because partnerships mean different things to different people, and there's not like a clear industry definition to the high level question like what are partnerships. It's not the same way that there is sales or in marketing, and it's probably the most misunderstood function of a go-to-market, probably for that reason that there isn't clear definitions. I think at the highest level you look at partnerships as people or organizations outside of your own that support your organization broadly. The reason I keep it that broad is because it can be from a revenue generation standpoint, but it can also be from a product standpoint. Right. So if you're selling, even if it's physical product or actually if it's software, you could have partners that can support that product development, or you partner with to be able to provide a more compelling offering. So it's really an organization that sits outside your own that helps you build your business and sell your business.
And so let's say you're a founder then, you're thinking about, partnerships sounds interesting. What is the sort of problem that you might have that you would start thinking partnerships might be the solution?
So that's one way to go about it. I typically like to think that, rather than addressing it from a point of a problem statement, we actually start to think about partnerships more proactively early. And just in the same way that you see, if you reversed it for another function of a go-to-market and said, right, at what point, what problem do I need to have to consider marketing? And it sounds ridiculous, right? It's funny, but as a partner professional being in the space, like I see it in the same way, which is, well, it's such a critical function of the go-to-market. Every successful business should be leveraging partnerships, and most do. So I would think it's foundational. So when you're early stage, whether you're bootstrapped or you're VC backed, in your early stage in your journey, it's thinking about what kind of organization do I want to be. So let's say I sell a complex software, a complex solution, and you're thinking, okay, well, I have, I don't have all of the domain expertise in-house. I don't have all the technical expertise in-house, and I don't actually want to build a service delivery overhead within the organization, especially in software companies. Up to 80% of that overhead that they run as a business is people. So you're thinking, well, what's the role that partners can play to support me? What's the role that partners can play at the top of the funnel? And I think that's what we'll talk about, is that partnerships really touch the end-to-end funnel of a go-to-market as well as other functions like product. So it's a case of what do I want to own and retain in-house versus where do I want to leverage partnerships as a means to create repeatable and ultimately channels for scale. So I would see it as more foundational in your go-to-market rather than being from a point of problem.
But it sounds even like, maybe it's just me, but I think go to market, and I think that's just sales.
Yeah.
Which sounds like is a sort of a misunderstanding on my point.
Yeah.
But this sounds like quite strategic. So it's kind of like, what are the bits of the business that we don't want to do ourselves, don't have to do? It's a big picture thing.
Definitely. When I think about partnerships more concretely, I think about partnerships from the perspective of credibility, of distribution, and product. So, let's say I'm a founder and I'm building a business. You're building out your product defensibility. You don't really have much in the way of commercial defensibility. You don't really have the volume of clients that de-risks your company or your product to potential buyers. Right? So you're thinking, well, what's one way in which you can de-risk that at the top of the funnel to open the door for opportunities? And you think, well, partnerships can be one of those channels, but not just there, not just at the top of the funnel for identifying opportunities to close. It's actually when I get into a sales cycle, it's again, where can I lean on? Let's say I've got a product that's relatively agnostic to industry. Maybe it's a horizontal play and I'm selling into financial services, and you need to have some maybe more specific banking knowledge, and we don't have that in-house. And yet it's kind of a necessity to be able to run an end-to-end sales cycle. So where do I hire for that in-house, or do I look at leaning on partnerships that have, or partners that have domain expertise in banking to be able to sell more focused into that industry? And then you go, okay, well, when it comes to delivery down the funnel, I'm thinking, okay, well, they maybe help me from a technical standpoint, they help me with the domain expertise, and go, okay, well, who's every product implementation has an element of behavior change or change management surrounding that implementation. Advisory services. It's not just most solutions are not exactly plug and play. Shock. Most people like to talk about plug and play solutions. It doesn't really exist. Most of them are solutions with an integration play. So who's owning that? Who's owning the adoption? Some people like to do it in-house, but some people might want to work with partners that already have extensive footprints inside those organizations, because then it's a nice dovetail into land and expand motions. So you start to think more strategically about the role that partners play in your end-to-end cycle. And ultimately, sales is the center of revenue generation, but how you sell doesn't have to be owned in-house end to end. Now, people like to control the controllables, which is why partnerships can be uncomfortable for a lot of businesses, because they think, I don't like the idea of having any dependency on my sales cycles, because that's the best practice when you're learning sales. It's to control the controllables and manage your timelines. And the idea of outsourcing component parts of your sales cycle is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. But it's once you go in with when you have a foundational partnership which is built on trust and solid economics, and you have that strong incentive alignment, then you get that compound benefit, and that's the channels on which you can scale. Does that make sense?
It does. It made me think. So a client of mine, they were a tech business, and they were selling. They were about a product, but sort of the founder realized that actually over half of his team and over half of his time was spent on sort of implementing the software, and realized that time, like when it comes to selling his business, he wanted to do. That wasn't being valued. Like the person buying was going to value him on sort of repeatable tech revenue. The implementation revenue was actually worthless to him in the long term.
Yeah, the multiples are typically less on the service delivery as it is the actual software component, right?
Yeah, so he ended up actually partnering with Accenture and saying, right, you do all the implementation, and we'll just focus on product. And actually, they scaled much faster.
And what happened to the delivery team?
Well, they went.
Yeah, so there's the chat. That's the inefficiency piece. Whereas actually, if it was thoughtful before, you might have mitigated the hiring of a team, the stretched resources, and the need to let go of a team, and then having to pivot into, because it's a big enablement play. It's like when you think partnerships, I always think quality assurance. You want to build that kind of centralized team that will support a one-to-many relationship with many partners and really build a very highly enabled competency within those partnerships. But it's not that easy to pivot from one to another very quickly. I think over time you'll build that scale, but that's why going back to having it as a foundational consideration when structuring your go-to-market is so important. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So you're saying there's a partnerships team that sits within if I answer that correctly.
Absolutely. Like it is its own designated function, and I think that's where some organizations struggle, because they go, well, who owns partnerships? Because let's say, we're building out a product and we're thinking of building into maybe an adjacent use case, and we say, well, I'd rather partner with another technology company. So, but that technology company, maybe we run joint sales cycles with. Who owns the relationship? Is it sales? Is it product? I mean, who owns the enablement of that? If you think about it, because partnerships are inherently agnostic across the organization from product and end to end in the go-to-market, that ownership is really important to define. And often that's why it always feels fluffy. Like, what the value that these partnerships bring are different to different functions of the go-to-market. And it's like, well, especially when you come to like hard KPIs, people talk about it's fluffy. We talk about influenced ACV, or they're influencing, or they're kind of just nice pieces of credibility to have. Well, it's actually, partnerships have a very, very clear, ROI and KPI definition. If you think about top of funnel, you think about sourced opportunities. You think in the funnel, you can think about your win rates, the size of your deals, the sales cycle length, which ideally should be shorter given the expertise, the domain expertise of that partner. And out funnel, you think about retention rates, and you can think about the transition from land to expand. And so, who owns those metrics? And that's why a dedicated partner team is needed to own those metrics end to end, and ultimately own the relationship to that partner. And their job every day is to make that partnership successful against those KPIs. Because if you don't have that dedicated person, like where does it sit?
So let's say, most people listening to podcasts are sort of scale-up founders. They've already kind of got their team to a certain size. Yep. They have a management team. suppose there are two questions that come to mind here. If we're saying this is foundational, at what point does this team appear? Because that feels like you start small and you think, oh, do I have the headcount for this, etc. So at what point does this role appear? And before it appears, where does it sit? And then I'll come to the second question, like if you are already a scale-up founder, what do you do at that point? But let's start with...
I'll take a step back. When we look at go-to-market, we often talk about building for scale. You mentioned that. And this, I'll come back to your answer. We'll talk building for scale. In order to build for scale, we have to have repeatable go-to-market success. And to create that repeatability, you have to have measurable, defined, proven performance within even a single channel and maybe proving out your ICP. I think the point at which you've proven out an ICP and you've been able to successfully prove the end-to-end adoption from, identifying opportunities, whether it's inbound, outbound, right through to delivery of whatever you're selling. And then you're looking at how do I create repeatability in my go-to-market? That's your trigger, because you're thinking, okay, well, I don't want to, spend all this resource upskilling partners when I don't actually know what works myself. So once at the point you're saying, right, I know what works. I know what we need to make clients successful from a delivery standpoint. I know kind of how to generate some pipeline. I know that's the point at which you go, okay, well, what's the role I want partners to play in this end-to-end? And that's the point at which, depending on how much dependency you want to create with the partners, you might look to hire someone full-time to own that relationship. And at the beginning, it might be recruiting and onboarding partners to look after different functions of the go-to-market, like with the team. Or again, if you're not having so much dependency, you can have that as a bit part resource within someone else, someone else's capacity.
So that could be like sort of a fractional resource.
Yeah, it could be fractional, or it could be somebody that's kind of... maybe they are owning delivery, but they're owning delivery with only a couple of clients and they want to onboard some partners to be able to support them as well. Or it could be part of someone's time, or it could be just somebody fractionally.
Given that we said that at the beginning, that actually partnerships, while misunderstood, should almost be a foundational part of anyone's strategy, are there businesses that shouldn't have a partnership?
If you want to build your organization entirely end-to-end in-house, there's probably not a need. Now, I think that's answering the question as to whether you need a partnerships person full-time. I can't think of an organization that doesn't have any partnership. I can't think of one, because everybody has even at least an integration dependency. So from a product standpoint, whether delivery, whether sales, and I often talk about if you're it also depends on what you're selling and who you're selling it to. So let's say I also have clients selling to enterprise, and they're selling to large conglomerate corporate organizations. And say one of my clients, they sell into the CFO's office. So when you get to these large kind of multinationals and you're a CFO, what do you care about? You care about profitability, you care about maybe your working capital optimization, you care about your cash flow preservation. You don't really care about the underlying tech stack. What do I care about that? I care that my business is successful in its top and bottom line and the metrics in between, and how I get there is neither here nor there to me. So let's say I do have a profitability problem. Who do I turn to? Do you turn to Salesforce? Do you turn to an individual vendor or what? Because it's a very complex problem. It's very generic or vague. Profitability. You'll turn to your trusted advisor, somebody that understands your business intimately and also has an understanding across people, process, and technology. So you'll turn to maybe a McKinsey or an Accenture or Deloitte. And that's the kind of seeds of, in that capacity, the finance transformation. And what they'll do is they'll go tech stack by tech stack by tech stack, and they'll be looking again at the role of people, process, and technology. And they're owning the end result, which is whatever KPI and the profitability you want to hit. And that's the reason why you have to work with these consultancies, is because often they're owning the problem statement of the decision maker within these multinationals. And it's harder for a vendor to get access to that or to be relevant. And so most vendors are just a tool in the toolbox of a large consultancy, as an example. And so that's why, like them or dislike them, and depending on who you're selling to, you might have to work with them. And the point you realize you have to work with them is the point at which you kind of need somebody to do that. Does that
it does, and it
resonate?
It really does, because I suppose what I'm hearing also is like a sense of what your internal partnership person might look like is going to slightly depend on where you feel this focus is between where in the GTM funnel you feel the majority of your partners are. Are they more like sort of a product partnership? Is it more on sort of the top of funnel or middle of funnel? Like where in that funnel, because that might influence what skills they bring.
That's a nice dovetail into so I've tried my best, given the lack of consensus in the industry about partnerships, from the definition to how you KPI them to what how you even structure an organization to be set up for partnerships. So I started to think about it like this. Okay, you've got different types of partner. So you've got maybe consulting partners, and they differ from small boutiques to what we call like regional players who may be multi-country, and then to the large conglomerates or big global firms like Accenture. Then you've got maybe technology partners who typically will sit adjacent to you in a tech stack if that's your business. Then you maybe have, if you are in that world, cloud and marketplace, so like Microsoft Azure, AWS. You maybe have private equity. You'll have different types of partner. So once you've got to understand this matrix, different types of partner, then you go, well, I can have different types of relation with them. I can sell to them, so I can treat them like an end customer. I can sell through them, so I can think of resell or resell type motions, or I can co-sell. I can just sell alongside them. So there's a complementary maybe service or offering that they have alongside our product or whatever we're selling. And then you can think about product and asset building. So maybe we want to build out certain use cases in our product, but we'd rather have our partners bring their domain expertise to help build that out. So when you think about it, that will then inform the types of people that maybe you bring on and the types of partners you work with and how the rest of the organization should work with these partners. So depending on the type of partner and the motion, and underpinning all of that, kind of foundationally, you have to have an enablement team, because ultimately, who's there owning this communication, not the execution of opportunities with partners, but who's owning the enablement of those partners. And we should treat the onboarding of them in the same way we would any employee of our own. And I get this question a lot, which is like, like partners screwing up my deals. I don't want to give them any more deals. I'm going like, well, why they screw up? And you're going, well, because they don't know what we're selling. They can't communicate well enough. I say, okay, great. Well, let's have a look. How are you enabling them? And you realize is that, if you hired an AE yourself and you have a rubbish onboarding, like you will likely have a rubbish output. Not always, but like it's you can't guarantee outcomes, but you can increase the probability of success. I said, just like any person will make mistakes, partners will too. It's a given. But you have to thoroughly onboard them and treat them like your own, actually over-enable them, because they don't live and breathe your company every single day.
So much in the same way, like with your team, you need to be like kind of a no excuses leader and be very clear what you want, onboard them correctly, treat them appropriately, all of these things. Same with a partner. And it sounds like as a founder, trying to scale up, you don't have the time to do that. And it's such a critical part of your growth. There needs to be someone whose sole function is management of partners.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that person at the beginning will have many hats, right? Because it's a big and complex area. And that's why we see larger organizations that have very successful partner programs like ServiceNow. Obviously, they're a very large organization, but they have a huge partner organization. And they're very heavily matrixed because, the Microsoft partnership is huge. So, I mean, that alone probably demands more than one person. It's ginormous. So I think that at the beginning, it's a case you might have to just use a resource fractionally or part-time. But the most important message I would convey is to think about partnerships more proactively when considering the go-to-market. But more often than not, what I see is it just sort of happens. We're selling and those people are just there. And I'm like, well, we should really work with them because they're always there. That's the way typically I'm seeing it. And it's reactive, which is fine. But there's a bit more advantage if you're actually more conscious on the decisions you make on how you partner.
So let's say we've taken if you're starting from scratch, there is a point at which you figure out your go-to-market strategy involves partnerships, at which point you start having a partner person, fractionally or otherwise. Let's say you've already got a scale up. So anyone listening who's got a scale up, don't have a partner person.
Yep.
What should they do after stopping listening today?
Have a look at your go-to-market and map out today the role that the partner plays in your go-to-market. If you're a scale-up, they're going to be there, whether you realize it or not. So map that out and then start to think, just answer the question, what do you want from partnerships? The expectation management is so, so important. Like, what do you want your organization to look like? And if it's a case of, I need to understand the art of the possible with what you can do with partners because I just don't know, then there's a knowledge gap, right? To maybe to speak to a partner professional. But the takeaway is partners are a scaling mechanism. They're hard work, like any relationship, and think consciously about what I want from these partners and know that they can impact your go-to-market in different ways. And so I need help, mid-funnel, top funnel, or conversion, my conversion rates, or maybe it's, hey, I'd love to sell into public sector as an example. And whatever you're selling, that's a really difficult regulated sector to sell in. And often people get stuck because there's complex frameworks and difficult regulations. And they realize, well, actually, if that's what you're wanting to do, then consider working with specialists to do that. But yeah, the takeaway is just to think about what impact they're having today and what do I want from them.
Because it's really interesting to think about, let's say, my own business as a coach. I feel like this is so much broader. Partnerships are so much broader than I would have thought. So I would, going to your definition of like sort of credibility, distribution, and product, I would say as a small business, in inverted commas, I already have partners at all three levels of those. So sort of from a sort of credibility thing, I work with other coaches and a founder coach network. From a distribution, I work with sort of VCs and head of platforms to sort of go out to their sort of portfolio. And then from a product thing, I work with other advisors who solve problems that sit adjacent to ones like founders and clients of mine might work with you. They might work with sort of a CMO. Like they can work with other. So it's just quite interesting thinking, even in a small, not scale up business, you can already see how partnerships are critical at each of those three stages.
I think about my business right now, very small, smaller than yours even, like small. And for me, partnerships is foundational to our success. And like you, I would say strategic partner with a few very trusted VCs because I understand their business model, I understand what motivates them, and I can convey how I can help their portfolio to make a very tangible benefit to them as well, right? Not just so I'm thinking of the motives of the VC, the motives of the founders and the operators that I work with, and then for us as well. And you just have to create that incentive alignment. I think about, so we go and help, the holistic go-to-market. Sometimes we double down and focus on partnerships, but go-to-market is a very big and broad topic. And depending on the maturity of the company, we might be working with many other stakeholders. So I have other companies I partner with because they do adjacent work to us, and it's complementary. So we've got the kind of VC it's maybe access, top of funnel. When I'm talking execution, maybe we've got other partners that we execute with because we're not domain experts in maybe it's paid social or paid marketing. We're not domain experts in that, but we've got a network of people that are. So if you think about it, it's a very conscious decision about, these are my strengths, this is where we focus on as an organization, and this is where we'll partner with to provide that compound benefit to the client. Because at the end of the day, it's about maximizing the client benefit, maximizing client value. And I just recognize that, I can't broad brush do everything. Let's not I don't want to belittle every other function in what they do by pretending you can deliver on that.
It's one of those restaurants you walk in, it goes, do you want fish and chips, Indian, sort of pizza?
I get scared on those menus. Have you seen the size of those menus? I'm thinking there's no, I am that weird person that looks at a ginormous menu and gets put off because I'm like, how can you service that? I'm thinking about, there's no way that you can have a chef that really understands the depth of all of those cuisines. No way. And I'm like, so then how many people are you having to hire? How are you sourcing all these different products? How many ingredients are involved? Your supply chain must be insanely, complex, and it's like a $7.99 buffet. And you're like, okay, something's got to give.
Well, I think so great. This is just actually, partnerships is just so integral, isn't it? Like I know that you do the wider GTM piece as well, but as a foundation stuff that people, it can sound like partnership is something you do as a really big company. Like maybe that's a sort of an assumption as well. It's kind of a partnership is something you do when you are Microsoft and you've got these big partners. But I think one of the takeaways of this so far is that actually you should be really thinking about your partnership program a lot earlier than would normally be on your radar.
Definitely. And like I gave we both gave tangible examples being very, very, very small, and actually, whether consciously or not, actually building partnerships. Because it makes sense. The incentive alignment is there, but it should be a conscious decision. And, for me, like it provides so much compound benefit to the company, because I made that decision early to think, okay, well, who are my clients? Where do they sit? How do they buy? What's important to them? Where's the influential stakeholders that I can get access to help me get access to them? And how do you build that incentive alignment? And I'd say like sales, partnerships is an art and a science, and the science is very much the KPIs or the business plans and the kind of objective metrics you want to hit, and the art is about how do you actually create incentive alignment? How do you build the foundational trusting relationships and build that feel good factor? Because at the end of the day, just like a direct sale to an end client, nobody wants to buy from people they don't like. And partners don't want to work with people they don't like. And I've seen instances in industry where partners choose an objectively worse solution to partner with because they find that company easier to partner with. So more important to them was the ease of doing business than that outweighed what was objectively a better solution.
It feels like there's a professionalization of the partnerships approach where it's both, where it is that kind of the relationship is important, but you are putting some quite hard metrics against that, going, what are we trying to achieve? Okay, how can we check if we're achieving it? Is it conversion rate? Is it speed of conversion? Like that feels like something that maybe if you do have partner programs, it feels like, oh, just go out and wine and dine our partners and make sure they like us. This feels like having the balance of both.
Yeah, I agree. But that's it's the same thing. We run sales cycles, and with important clients, customers. We want to go and meet them. We want to go and maybe take them for coffee or for dinner, get to know them, and you can surface different pains and just build an important relationship. It doesn't take away from the fact you're running a sales cycle and you're trying to close some business. And it's the same way with partnership. I'm not saying don't take them for coffee, don't have dinners with them, but I'm trying to get us away from this idea of like revenue influence. I'm like, what does that mean? What does it actually mean? Be tangible. And like you can KPI you KPI the partner differently, right? So the partner manager might be KPI'd again through very specific metrics or a hard metric on maybe it's source to close revenue, maybe it is looking at sub metrics like the win rates, like the sales cycle length, like the as an example. And then with the partner, also knowing from them that your business is not everything to them. So the classic, let's take an example, software and consulting, because it's a nice, easy one to understand. I license software and they build services. So they're thinking service revenue, and you're thinking ARR, my ACVs, my license, my software license. That's what I care about. And they don't speak the same language. They're thinking about, often they're archaic, but they're thinking about billable hours and billables, and they're thinking about your ARR and your ACVs. It's like it's not the same language. But you have to find that's the incentive alignment has to be created so that you can track the right behaviors. So you'll have, for example, when we run co-sell, when I've done it before in an operator capacity or with clients, and you build a co-sell motion, you want to jointly sell, we should be sourcing them opportunities just as they source us, because it has to be a win-win. Because why would they continually source business for you for no reason, without getting anything back? It's a two-way street. But again, that's specifically for co-sell. There's different types of partners, and that's what I'm saying. You KPI them differently and you treat them differently.
But you're going into it with a very strategic thing of going, this is the problem we're trying to solve. This are the KPIs, how we can track it.
Yep.
It's very deliberate.
That's a great word. Yeah, it is. It's very deliberate. And I think that up until now, most companies have fallen into the trap of not making it deliberate, and they're left feeling that it's fluffy. I get this word a lot. It's fluffy. I'm going, well, of course it's fluffy, because you're not making any conscious decisions with how you partner. You're partnering out of need rather than putting any kind of strategic effort or resourcing into how you partner.
And it feels almost when you were saying, oh, I partner with, like, let's say, it feels like deeper partnerships rather than many partnerships. It's almost like maybe it's fluffy. It's kind of, if your goal, if you're rewarding people on the number of partnerships you have, that feels like a very high level fluffy metric.
I would never have a number of partnerships, because number means nothing. Because again, like any function, the closer you can tie it to top and bottom line, the better. So I mean, there's a top line goal, and if the maths means you have to have an X number of partners, then you have to have an X number of partners for the reason of hitting a top line goal. But if you can do it with less, great. I'm not penalizing you because you can do it with less. It's fantastic. I always try to avoid any kind of intermediary KPIs. Like, it's not, there's no need for that. Like, there's where you can attribute direct value, let's do so. And in terms of volumes, when I say it just depends. Let's say you run an affiliate program. That's fantastic. Then you can have lots of partners. They're lower touch. Partners love your solution. They're already working in similar spaces. Give them a link. Go and why not? Make it low touch and easy for them. And that way you can address lots of volumes low touch. But if you're dealing with maybe large, complex selling into enterprises, it's a different type of partner that needs to help you there. So it depends if I'm running like a PLG motion, an SLG, if I'm dealing with like SMB and SME businesses, mid-market, enterprise. Like, that's why I always say at the beginning, I was saying it depends, because every organization has their own circumstance and context, and you have to build a program that works for you. And if I'm building a business for kind of SMB segment, but this chat of Deloitte, etc., got no relevance, none. Like, it doesn't. But what I'm trying to convey is that it is exceptionally broad, and it can be prescriptive, it can be deliberate, and you can build a very bespoke program for whatever the needs of the business are.
But that feels like a very important first step. So it's kind of like, if we can accept that most, if not all, companies would benefit from a partner program, and therefore a partner sort of folk specialist within their business. Step one is really having a very deliberate thought around what you're trying to achieve, what metrics you're trying to achieve, where they're going to fit in your funnel, where your focus is going to be.
What kind of company do I want to be? What kind of organization am I trying to build? That's the most foundational thing. Like, what do I want? And the things like, as we say, there's no right and wrong. You want to manage all these overheads, good for you, no worries. But, make a decision. You just have to be conscious about what type of go-to-market I'm trying to build. And then partnerships is overlaid in the same way sales will be. Maybe there are many businesses that exist out there on pure resell. They don't have overheads of sellers in-house. That's okay. That's also very reasonable.
The thing that's really now just making me think is, something I see with founders is they're in the survival stage. It's very much like they're do it yourself, get it done, sort of quite controlling. And one of the shifts they need to make to get to scaling phase is the idea of make it happen through other people.
We're talking about that measurable, repeatable, scalable. And you talk about, like, when you're in that survival phase and you're trying to prove some kind of success, prove there's a product market fit, prove that clients can obtain value and maybe define the value from whatever you're selling. Like, that's really important before you can do anything repeatedly. So it's like, so that chasm that often exists, and I see it between being measurable and repeatable. It's at that point, once you've proven that I can build something, I can sell it, and I can ensure people derive value from it, and I can prove that end to end. That's the point at which you go, okay, how do we make this repeatable? How do we do this 50 times? How do we do it 100 times? And at that point, you start to think about resourcing, and you start to go, okay, well, we've been quite scrappy, but hustle, like, just pashing stuff together. And now it's like, well, now we need to be deliberate, to use the word you used earlier.
But I wanted to step further, like, almost the mindset. You've got to go through a mindset shift as well, because, like, yes, theoretically it's got to be measurable and then shifting to repeatable. You've also got to kind of be willing to let go.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. You do, because especially that is true. I mean, I'm interested to the work you're doing as well. Like, if you're dealing with founders and who have high degrees of control, it can be uncomfortable, especially you've built that organization from ideation to where it is, and you've owned that end-to-end and made it a success. It can sometimes be quite daunting, even the prospect of hiring internally and let other people do it.
And then
then go a step further and actually say, like, these people even work for you. They're not even legally obligated to do what you're asking them to do. You've even given me food for thought, because I've always asked the question, like, what do you want your business to be? I've tried to invoke that, but I think it's definitely a mindset shift to get yourself from that space, from being miserable into actually building a repeatable business.
Oh, Stefan, this has been fascinating. I think, I'm now not clear on what partnerships is and how wide it goes, but I think really what I'm taking away, I hope this is this idea of really go with a deliberate strategy, do it earlier than you think, and if you are going to do it, and you should, make sure there is someone in your business who you go to and go, this is your remit, this is what success looks like, not fluffy sort of high level sort of number of partners, but sort of these are the metrics and results I want to see, and commit to it. Like, take the right mindset to it and go, this is going to be a better result, we need to do this will lead to scalability, I just need to properly commit to it.
It's spot on. I think the last thing I would add to that, which is quite important, is when it comes to the expectation management, compared to you hire a BDR or maybe you hire a salesperson, there's a lag effect to when a partner actually starts producing for you, because you have to start thinking, building a program, enabling them, and this can be months, onboarding and enabling them before they start to be productive and help you scale. And so often that's something that either puts people off or they're not thinking about the KPIs in the right way. So if you're talking about how many deals they brought me and how many opportunities I've closed in the first 3 months of a partnership, it's the wrong thing. So definitely the principle right going forward, but they're a scaling mechanism for the future. So it's an investment you need to make over 6, 9, 12 months.